Hey folks, Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a Round 8 summary, Operation SF, which means San Francisco. Well, it's been a dogfight all over the map, and depending on which nation is going, that's the side that I think is going to win. So currently, Japan has amalgamated the bulk of its navy and around the Caroline Islands. And they have two potentially loaded transports there with a follow-up navy behind it of a bunch of submarines and a destroyer and another loaded transport. And they are building navy back home. Along the coast of Asia, Japan has decided the safer play is probably to guard the victory cities, which are Shanghai and Hong Kong. They've got some pretty big stacks there that are almost impenetrable. They've reinforced the Philippines with some aircraft and a pillbox, and they do have a military base on Hawaii, so they're producing an infantry there per turn. The combined Commonwealth, which is the Anzac Royal Dutch and British Navy, which is quite a bit smaller now than the Japanese Navy, is 4 sea zones away and currently safe off the coast of Sydney. America up here, which Navy combined total is still smaller than the Japanese Navy, but they now have a major IC in San Francisco. They built a couple carriers and a couple destroyers this turn. They wanted to build more, and we'll get into the Atlantic in a second. The KMT has been receiving some Lend-Lease armor, some light armor from the Americans, so they are sort of headed towards the coast. They are, producing 5 infantry a turn and just building a stack. They've got about 27 infantry in this pile here. The black chips are representing 5 each, and they are starting to spread out. The Russians are wanting to come into the Chinese occupied territory, but if they do, that's a declaration of war against the Japanese. So the Japanese are, they've committed 8 infantry to hold the Russians back in Namur and Vladivostok, so that is a standoff. And they both seem to be happy with that as of now. Over here in the Middle East, the British had to make a decision. Currently they had a stack of about 8 or 9 ground units, and no matter where they went, the Italians were probably going to can opener and they were going to lose their stack. Anyways, they decided to roll the dice and attack the German horde of tanks, which ground units. So there's still 18 tanks remaining, but they did kill 10 units and they lost about 10 themselves. So probably advantage to the Germans, but this was a better scenario than if they had waited the Germans to attack them, because they had use of all their bombers. So not sure who came out on top, but the Italians now are into the Middle East and the Germans are right behind them. The Germans are going to have to make a decision which direction they want to go, whether that's towards Calcutta or whether that's towards Cairo. The Italians probably do not have enough to take it on their own. So that is going to be interesting. But look at here, the FEC forces are making, well over 45 IPP a turn. They are producing tanks. Currently, their stack is actually bigger than the first wave of German armor that's coming towards them. So just that tells me it's probably a smarter decision to head towards Cairo. But does going towards Calcutta force the FEC to turn around and give Japan a little bit of a breathing room? Because then it opens up possibly Singapore and Siam and FEC. And the Japanese economy is currently only making 52 IPP a turn. The Americans are over 100. The Anzacs are at 24. The Canadians are at 15. And so that is a big problem for the Japanese. Like, they are just going to be shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. The Russians are now down to 13 IPP a turn. Still a standoff in the Med. However, the Italians did build some medium armor at Tobruk last round, and the British are sort of shrinking. Germany is building a wave of reinforcements of tanks and fast movers that are all headed into Russia and down to the Caucasus and into the Middle East. And the Germans have amalgamated their navy now off of Bordeaux, and that's at a naval base, and there's about 18 units there, so that is a problem for the British. There's only currently one transport, but the Americans and the Russians and the Canadians and the British have responded by bulking up, amalgamating their navy off the east coast of the United States with a complement of a scramble. Because why the Americans, and they decided to spend some money here, and that is because of all these convoys on boxes. If they don't defend these, and say Cairo falls and the Germans all of a sudden want to start bombing London, all of a sudden that almost takes London or the British out of the game. So, and they have to defend the factory here in Ottawa. They have to defend the factory here in Washington. So it's not for nothing, but it's definitely forced the Allies to turn around, which is what the Germans want the Allies to do. A little bit of a sideshow happening here in South America. The Americans blitzed their tanks from Panama down, and they are starting to surround the 3 remaining German ground units that are in South America. So that is going to tilt the tide for the Americans, or at least pad their economy a little bit. The Germans are now doing their own Operation Torch. These are the Spaniards who are now into the northwest portion of Africa. And so I would anticipate the Italian Navy and the German Navy linking up here off the coast of Tobruk, possibly next round, and forcing this British Navy out of the Med once and for all, which might not be a bad thing if that Navy then is going to maybe headed towards the South Pacific and help out the Allies over here. So lots of game to be played, and depending on what nation is going, that's who I believe is going to win. So I will save myself the embarrassment and let you folks, come up with your own opinions. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for round 9.